Hello, this is Jules. The terms in the title of this video are frequently confused with each other in various combinations. This video clarifies how I use these terms. This is a more intermediate video, so if there are terms or concepts in it that are unfamiliar to you, check out the Start Here and/or glossary playlists, which I'll link below in the description. In the course of development, consciousness progression, or spiritual progression, it is common to get previews of the next stage before you're actually centered there. For example, you can be in green stage and have a brief preview of yellow stage systems thinking. Or you could be in gross stage in spiritual development and get a preview of subtle stage. These previews might feel profound, or they might feel pretty mundane, but regardless, they are ahead of where your current center of gravity is. And before you make the full shift into the next stage, your access to them will be spotty and unreliable. They just sort of give you a heads up about what's coming. That's why I call them previews. I generally reserve the term peak experience to refer to a preview that is specifically on the path of spiritual development. Again, it might feel profound, or it might feel pretty underwhelming. It's just a preview of a spiritual stage that you haven't fully attained yet. Mystical experiences, on the other hand, are profound. They're amazing and can be absolutely transformative. And they can happen in any spiritual state, gross, subtle, causal, witnessing, or non-dual, and regardless of which spiritual stage you're currently at. They can happen at a state that is before, at, or ahead of your current spiritual stage. For example, you can be in subtle stage and have a gross state mystical experience of feeling connected to the whole physical solar system, or you could have a subtle state mystical experience of communing with a goddess. Or you could have a witnessing state mystical experience of being one with the void. So you can have a mystical experience that is also a peak experience, a preview of a future spiritual stage. Or you can have a mystical experience that is from your current stage or a previous stage and therefore not a peak experience. You can also have a peak experience that is rather ordinary feeling and therefore not a mystical experience. And you can have any of these experiences, previews, peak experiences, or mystical experiences, whether or not you've experienced ego death, awakening, or enlightenment. And mystical experiences, previews, and peak experiences don't necessarily lead to ego death, awakening, or enlightenment. Finally, ego death, awakening, and enlightenment are not the same thing. Ego death is a specific type of mystical experience. It's an experience of the dissolution of self. In other words, it's an experience of dying. It can happen with or without physical death. With physical death, if you come back afterward, it's called a near-death experience, or NDE. If you don't come back afterward, it's just called death. And yes, ordinary physical death where you don't come back afterward does result in ego death as well. We just don't normally hear about it. You can, however, remember it through regression hypnosis or other methods. Ego death without physically dying can happen just like any other mystical experience, for example, when meditating or when taking an entheogenic substance. Ego death can lead to awakening, but they're not the same thing. You can have ego death without experiencing awakening. For example, I experienced ego death during meditation at one point, but I didn't experience awakening until several months later. That said, I do think that experiencing ego death helped me along the process to awakening. Awakening is the experiential discovery that manifested reality is not real, and that there are other layers of reality which are much more real. It is not a purely intellectual understanding, it is a felt experience. Suddenly, manifested reality feels fake, like an illusion, a simulation, a movie, or a video game. And there is an experience of something else that feels a lot more real. Awakening can be functionally equated with the shift from subtle stage to causal stage in spiritual development. Neither ego death nor awakening make your ego go away. If you are still physically alive and mentally functional, your ego is still there. It's just that after ego death and or awakening, you no longer believe that it's who you really are. If ego death and or awakening haven't happened by the time you get to coral indigo stage in consciousness progression, you will need to go through both before you can proceed on to teal violet stage. Enlightenment, on the other hand, is the direct experience of absolute truth. Again, this is not an intellectual understanding, it is a felt experience. It is the non-dual stage of spiritual development. And if it hasn't happened before aubergine stage, it will need to happen before progress past aubergine stage is possible. Enlightenment is notoriously difficult to describe. This is why people who are enlightened use so many metaphors, if they try to describe it at all. It's also why so many people are confused about what enlightenment is. But I'll do my very best to describe it. First, I'll describe what it's not. It is not a mystical experience. You can have mystical experiences both before and after enlightenment, but enlightenment itself is not a mystical experience. Enlightenment is not a constant state of bliss, unconditional love, boundless joy, etc. You can have those experiences while enlightened. You can also have those experiences before enlightenment, but enlightenment itself is independent of those experiences and can feel quite ordinary. Enlightenment does not make anything go away. It doesn't make your ego go away. It doesn't transport you out of physical reality. It doesn't solve any problems. It doesn't heal you physically, emotionally, or mentally. And it doesn't get rid of any shadows. Enlightenment is also not temporary. Once enlightenment happens, there's no going back. You could say that once you see absolute truth, you can't unsee it. So, what is absolute truth? It is that there is only consciousness. Consciousness is the only thing that exists. It is indivisible, but not homogeneous. It is, in fact, fractal. When you experience this for yourself, you recognize that you don't exist as a separate being at all. There is no you as an individual existence. In fact, there is no separate existence of anything. There is no gross reality. There is no subtle reality or causal reality either. There is no void in the sense of a nothingness that is separate from somethingness. There is only consciousness. That is all. Everything else is an illusion. So that is my description of the absolute truth. But to be clear, what I just said is not absolute truth. Absolute truth can't be captured in words. Not possible. The best anyone can do with words is point toward absolute truth. It is a direct experience, not a description, a belief, a concept, or anything you can understand through thinking. It is something you know because you are experiencing it. So even though your ego, experiences, problems, ailments, etc. are all still happening, you know that they're not real. And you don't need to believe that or remember it because it is your new reality. Awakening comes before enlightenment and can happen quite suddenly and seemingly out of the blue. You can also spend a significant amount of time sort of half awake. Enlightenment, however, is either on or off. There is no half enlightened. And there is a lot of work between awakening and enlightenment. Enlightenment doesn't happen by accident out of the blue. Spiritual development is the path that leads from the illusion of physical reality through awakening to enlightenment. That's the work. Mystical experiences and magical/mystical abilities can happen along the way on your spiritual journey. You can absolutely explore them if you want to, for as long as you want to. It is perfectly okay to decide that you want to spend part or all of your life mastering the magical and or mystical arts, just like it's perfectly okay to decide to spend part or all of your life mastering any other part of the illusion. You can also choose after enlightenment to spend some or all of your time mastering one or more parts of the illusion. Why not? But if what you feel compelled to do right now is to work toward awakening and/or enlightenment, there are things you can do that are very effective at progressing your spiritual development and increasing the likelihood of awakening and enlightenment. One of the simplest and most direct paths is a process of spiritual autolysis. I'll put it linked in the description in case you want to dive right into that right now. A few words to wrap up. All of these concepts I've described in this video are very difficult to conceive of if you haven't yet consciously experienced them for yourself. If you're feeling very confused right now, that's okay. You can ask questions in the comment section if you want to. You can also just let these seeds sit in the back of your brain and soak. Maybe they'll sprout later. Or maybe you'll forget about them. It is much saner to stay in the illusion, faithfully playing your character. That's why the illusion exists, after all. But if you have experienced one or more of these phenomena and/or you are feeling inexorably drawn toward them, I hope this video helped give you some landmarks to recognize on your journey.